Hello everyone. So this video is about to know the difference between LangChain, LangGraph and MCP. And here we will know this using examples. So let's start with LangChain. So here I have written in one example. Like suppose a user is asking explanation of the Python function. So in input we will take this information and in output we need to provide the explanation of the user's ask. Like user ask is definition of this Python function. Here in input we pass this information and that information then we convert it into a prompt and that prompt we pass into a LLM and then LLM is providing us a answer like explanation, and we can see to complete this task, to implement this task, we only need one input, then LLM, and then one answer node. So this this kind of simple task we can implement using LangChain. So whenever the task we can implement using a sequential pipeline, a linear pipeline, there we use LangChain. But suppose you have a little bit complicated task. Complicated task, that means like this task, where user is asking to write a code, then we need to run it and then we need to check whether the code is working or not. So suppose we are uh, trying to complete this task using LangChain, then what we are got here. So in input, we passes the information. We need to write a code. What code? We need to write a sorting code. And that information the LLM uses and provide a written code of the sorting. But in execution time, we throw an error. We got an error. And since we are using a linear pipeline, so this information in this node, we got an error. So our pipeline will stop and it will not provide any output and it will stop. And in this case, we are not getting any output, any whether we got an error or whether we which part we stuck. We need to check manually. So like this type of complicated task, where we need to involve any loop, there we use LangGraph. So LangGraph help us to create a loop pipeline, a complex pipeline. So how LangGraph does this? So in first node, using LangGraph, we created this graph pipeline. So in first node, what we are passing? We are passing the information where we are writing a code. And in the second node, we got an error. And what we can solve here using LangGraph? So LangGraph provides us a flexibility to store the information into a state. And in state, we store the information of where we got an error. What we can do here? We can pass the state information again into our LLM. And what LLM here will do? LLM can work on that error. And while working on that error, it will rewrite the code and provide us a correct version of the code. And this way, LangGraph help to solve the complicated task and using a loop. So what is the basic difference between LangChain and LangGraph? So the one-liner definition is where we where we can solve the task using a linear pipeline, there we use LangChain. But in complicated type of task, we use LangGraph to use a loop, to create a loop and solve the task. So now let's come to the MCP. What is MCP is? Again, using example, here users ask us to review the GitHub repo and also review the local files, and then we need to test. We need to run the test and provide a report. So suppose we are not using a model context protocol. So what we need to do, we need to write a separate code for to connect with GitHub and separate code to connect with local files and then separate code to connect with database. So here, if we are not using MCP, we need to manage three different server in a different code. So suppose in future we need to we need some modification, then we need to look each code and rewrite every code. So this is like this is like complex when you are managing different many kind of servers. So MCP helping us to write MCP help us to connect with a different servers in a standardized format and in a same protocol. Like you don't need to manage different codes, different API codes for different servers. Here, what MCP is providing, MCP is providing a structured format to connect with every each servers, and the simple one-liner statement using we can connect with servers and execute our complicated tasks. So, what is the difference in the summarized format, if I can say? If you need to connect with multiple servers, then we use MCP. And if you need to perform a complicated task, like where you need a loop, where you need a involvement of a previous node, there we use LangGraph, and where we can solve a linear task using a linear sequential pipeline, there we use LangChain. So this is a basic difference between these three: LangChain, LangGraph, and MCP. I hope you like this video, and if you have any suggestions, please do comment. Thank you for watching.